All right, so we addressed these first few boxes, these first few pieces of information for the description, the location, and the industry, getting us those multipliers. But now it's set, we want to plug in the information that we have about this project. So this is the main meat of the information. These are the jobs, the salaries, and the capital investment. So first thing here, we have the jobs. From our notes about this project, we know that they're going to hire 140, or actually relocate 140 workers in year one, and then they're hiring another 100 over the time period. So I'm going to put in that hiring schedule that they've given us. In this case, it's 100 jobs, we can see, through year 4. And so in total, we have 240 jobs being created. And as I've typed that information on the right-hand side, you can already see some of the information starting to calculate. Now I'm going to click continue here, and we're just going to kind of accordion through these sections. So we've entered jobs and we've captured the phase in. And the next input is this one called workers relocating. And then we're asking for the percent of the direct workers moving to the city of Arlington. So in this case, we're thinking about these 240 direct jobs that are being created, and what percentage of those overall will actually represent new households in the city of Arlington. So it requires someone moving to Arlington to fill this job. So if we think about it and we look at this, we have this pop-up here that can tell you a little bit more about that input. This one's a little bit, the other ones are probably a little more straightforward. This one's a little tricky. But if we think about it, we have 240 new jobs being created. We want to think about where the workers are going to come from that are going to fill these 240 jobs. So number one, we hope that there's a bunch of people that already live in Arlington that are now going to have the opportunity to work in the city of Arlington. So some of the positions will be filled by people who live in the city of Arlington. Now, you might have people, and in this case, Arlington is kind of in a metro area where there'd be folks that live nearby. They don't necessarily live in Arlington, but they're going to maybe fill one of these 240 positions, and they're going to represent commuters that would be moving in, that would be commuting into work in Arlington every day. And so the commuting is a portion of that as well. So you have the people that already live in Arlington, you've got the people that would commute in but not live in Arlington, and then third, we've got this idea that maybe some of the people are going to relocate from outside of the area and they're going to come and represent new households. So I've got a default in here. You can override that default. In this case, it might make sense based on what they've told us. They're relocating some workers. We think a bunch of those are actually going to end up living in Arlington, because again, they might relocate but live outside of the area. But if we bump this up maybe to 15% or something, we can see how that's going to affect our project. And again, this idea of individuals or new worker households relocating to the city has implications, throughout the model for us, as we think about potentially new homes being constructed and possibly property tax being collected on those new homes. But on the cost side too, you can think about it from the city's perspective. There may be an increase in cost to provide, city services, police, fire, EMS, those sorts of things can all increase as you have more population. So this is kind of an important one. But you can imagine, if you think through this in other cases, if you look at your local workforce, you might say, hey, we have enough people that can fill these positions, whatever the particular project might be. And we say, look, we don't think anybody's going to relocate for this type of job. Or like in this case, we might have people relocating from outside of the area, and we want to capture that here. If I hit continue, we're going to jump to our next section, which here is salaries. In our setup, we were told that the company was going to hire these workers and they were going to make $65,000 a year. So we're looking for the average salary here. We're going to plug in $65,000. And in this case, as I entered that first number, it filled in the rest. And if I click here, I'll extend this out and we can see actually we see a full 10 years worth of input. So you have the ability to modify this if you'd like to. What's happening here is I put in $65,000 and it's increasing at a 2% annual increase all the way down. You can modify this if you wanted it to be just $65,000 flat, you could do that. Or if you thought maybe it was going to be more like 3%, you could put in 3%, for example. But this just helps you avoid having to type in, say, 10 years worth of these values if they're just going to, be an assumption here about the percent increase. Now, if you need to, maybe we're going to have $65,000 as the average salary while they're hiring those positions. So through maybe the first 4 years, for example, maybe we'll leave it at 65,000, and you can do that. And now our 3% just picks up in year 5. Our next input is capital investment. And this is one we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into in a later video to show how this all comes through. For the time being, they've told us that there's going to be an investment of $50 million and in the building and other real property improvements. That's 50, not 5 million. And then the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, we've been told they're going to invest $20 million. And like I say, there's going to be an additional video where we go into kind of how we take these capital investment inputs and translate it into taxable value to calculate the tax revenue that might be generated. So we'll look at that in a separate video next. But let's get through the rest of these inputs. If I hit continue here, we've got a field for building permits and fees that might be paid to the city. This might just be another revenue line item we want to pick up for the city. In my case, I don't know that information yet. I'm just going to skip it. We can leave things blank if they don't apply or if we don't know them yet and come back to it later if we'd like. If I hit continue here, we'll go to our next section, which is taxable inventories. In this case, I'm going to assume that there are no taxable inventories. Some of our clients or some of economic developers in other communities might be saying, well, what are you talking about with taxable inventories? That doesn't apply in our state. Well, let's imagine, as we are here in this case, looking at a Texas community. Texas is still one of the few states that taxes inventories in many cases. And so we've got an input that allows you to calculate or to accept an input for inventories. For other communities where maybe you don't tax inventories, or maybe you don't even tax local sales, it's maybe only taxed at the state level, for example, you won't see some of these inputs. So if you don't have taxable inventories at all, and across the board they just aren't subject to tax, you won't see an input for it. And similarly, as I mentioned with the taxable sales and taxable purchases, we've got inputs here because in these communities that we're looking at, they do have a local sales tax. And so we want to have the ability to plug in those inputs. We're going to skip taxable purchases because in this case, they really don't have much, although a company could have taxable purchases that would be significant. But we did have taxable sales in this case, and we had a 1.5 million per year. I'm going to put in 1.5 million in the first year. I'm going to let it increase by the standard 2% that we have in here. And with just that little bit of information, we've completed everything we need about the project as we entered the description, location, and industry, and then the information that we had about jobs, salaries, and capital investment. We're going to go into a little bit more to talk about some of these calculations in the next video.